I thought my wedding day would be perfect. The flowers were arranged, the guests were seated, and I was about to marry the love of my life. But as I stood there in my white dress, holding a manila envelope containing DNA results that would change everything, my mother grabbed my arm and whispered the words that shattered my entire world. Elena, there's something I need to tell you before you make the biggest mistake of your life. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Elena Martinez, and this story begins 3 months before what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I was 28, living in Portland, Oregon, and completely head over heels for my fiancé, Marcus Thompson. We'd been together for 4 years, and everything seemed perfect. Marcus was a software engineer, tall with kind brown eyes, and he made me laugh every single day. Our families got along wonderfully, or so I thought. The first sign something was wrong came during a casual dinner at my mother's house in late February. My mom, Patricia Martinez, had always been somewhat secretive about our family history, but that night she seemed particularly on edge. Marcus was talking about how excited he was to officially become part of our family, and my mom just stared at her plate, barely touching her food. "Mom, are you feeling okay?" I asked, noticing how pale she looked. She forced a smile. "Just wedding stress, honey. You know how these things can be overwhelming." But Marcus noticed too. After we left, he mentioned how strange my mom had been acting. "She kept looking at me like she'd seen a ghost," he said as we drove back to our apartment. I brushed it off. My mom had always been the anxious type, and planning a wedding was stressful for everyone involved. But over the next few weeks, her behavior became increasingly bizarre. She would call me at odd hours, asking seemingly random questions about Marcus's family. Where were his parents from originally? Did he have any relatives in California? Had he ever mentioned anything about his father's side of the family? "Why are you so interested in Marcus's genealogy all of a sudden?" I asked during one of these strange phone calls. "Oh, you know me," she laughed nervously. "I just like to know about family histories. It's fascinating to trace where people come from." This was completely out of character for my mom. She'd never shown any interest in genealogy before, and frankly, she'd always been more focused on the present than the past. Something was definitely bothering her, but every time I tried to press for details, she would change the subject. The situation escalated in March when Marcus and I attended his cousin's wedding in Sacramento. It was a beautiful ceremony, and we were both feeling romantic and excited about our own upcoming nuptials. But when I called my mom the next day to tell her about the wedding, her reaction was completely unexpected. "Sacramento?" she repeated, her voice shaking. "Did you say you were in Sacramento?" "Yes, Mom. Marcus's cousin lives there. Remember? I told you about the wedding last week." There was a long pause. "Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you and Marcus ever talked about taking a DNA test? Like one of those ancestry things?" The question caught me completely off guard. "A DNA test? No, why would we?" "Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "Nothing, sweetie. I'm just curious. These DNA tests are so popular now, and I was wondering if young couples do them together, for fun." But her voice didn't sound curious. It sounded terrifying. That conversation haunted me for days. I couldn't shake the feeling that my mom was hiding something significant, something that somehow involved Marcus. I started paying closer attention to her behavior around him, and what I noticed made my stomach turn. Every time Marcus would mention his childhood, his family, or anything about his background, my mom would get this look on her face, like she was solving a puzzle that she desperately didn't want to complete. 2 weeks before the wedding, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted my mom directly, showing up at her house unannounced on a Saturday morning. "Mom, we need to talk, and I need really talk. No more changing the subject, no more weird questions about Marcus's family. What is going on?" She was in her kitchen, supposedly organizing her recipe box, but her hands were shaking as she shuffled through the index cards. "Elena, honey, I don't know what you mean. I've just been a little stressed about the wedding preparations." This isn't about wedding stress, and we both know it. You've been acting strange for months, specifically around Marcus. Did he do something? Did someone say something about him? I need to know. My mom set down the recipe cards and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of guilt, fear, and something that looked almost like grief. Elena, some things are better left in the past. Some secrets exist to protect people, not to hurt them. What secrets? Mom, you're talking in riddles and it's driving me crazy. If there's something I need to know about Marcus or about our relationship, you have to tell me. She walked over to the kitchen window and stared out at her garden for what felt like an eternity. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. There are things about your father that I never told you. Things about the time before you were born. This completely blindsided me. My father, Roberto Martinez, had died when I was 15. He'd been a good man, a construction worker who worked hard to provide for our family. What could my mom possibly have kept secret about him, and what did it have to do with Marcus? What about Dad? Mom, he's been gone for 13 years. What does any of this have to do with my wedding? She turned away from the window, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. Elena, your father wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. We both did. And sometimes those mistakes have consequences that you never see coming. I felt like I was going insane. Nothing she was saying made any sense, but the fear in her voice was real, and it was starting to infect me too. Mom, please, just tell me what you're talking about. Whatever it is, we can deal with it together. But she just shook her head. I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Elena, I need you to trust me on this. Please consider postponing the wedding, just for a few months, while I figure some things out. Postpone my wedding? Are you out of your mind? Mom, I love Marcus. We've been planning this for a year. Our families, our friends, everything is already arranged. I'm not postponing anything based on some vague fears you won't even explain. The conversation ended badly, with both of us in tears and nothing resolved. I left her house feeling more confused and frustrated than ever. That night, I told Marcus about the conversation, leaving out some of the more bizarre details because I didn't want to worry him unnecessarily. Maybe she's having some kind of breakdown, Marcus suggested gently. Wedding stress affects everyone differently, and losing your dad at such a young age might be bringing up old grief. It was a reasonable explanation, and I wanted to believe it. But deep down, I knew this was about more than grief or wedding stress. My mom was terrified of something specific, something connected to Marcus or his family, and her terror was becoming contagious. The final straw came 1 week before the wedding. I was at work, trying to focus on a client presentation, when my mom called me in tears. Elena, I've been doing some research online, and I think there might be something you need to know about Marcus's family. Research? Mom, what kind of research? I've been looking into public records, trying to trace some things back, and there are some dates and places that are making me very concerned. At this point, I was beyond frustrated. Mom, enough with the cryptic comments. Either tell me what you think you found, or stop bringing it up. I'm getting married in 7 days, and I can't keep having these conversations. There was a long pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was different, resolved, like she'd finally made a difficult decision. Elena, I think you and Marcus might need to take a DNA test before the wedding. A DNA test? Mom, why would we need a DNA test? That's insane. Please, just trust me on this. There are things about your father's past, about where he lived and who he knew before we got married, that I never told you. And Marcus's family, the timing, the places. Elena, I'm scared that you two might be more connected than you realize. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually had to sit down at my desk because my legs felt weak. Connected how? Mom, what are you trying to tell me? I can't be sure without a test. But Elena, please, I'm begging you. Before you marry him, before you start a life together, please just get the test done, for your own peace of mind. I hung up the phone feeling nauseous. The suggestion was so outrageous, so impossible, that I couldn't even process it properly. But the fear in my mom's voice was real, and despite how crazy it sounded, I found myself unable to dismiss it entirely. That evening, I did something I never thought I'd do. I ordered 2 DNA testing kits online. When the DNA testing kits arrived 3 days later, I stared at the small boxes on my kitchen counter for hours. The rational part of my mind kept screaming that this was ridiculous, that I was letting my mother's paranoia ruin what should be the most exciting week of my life. But there was another voice, quieter but persistent, that whispered maybe she knew something I didn't. Marcus found me sitting at the kitchen table that evening, still staring at the unopened packages. "Babe, what are those?" he asked, dropping his laptop bag and loosening his tie. I took a deep breath. There was no easy way to explain this without sounding completely insane. "They're DNA testing kits." He raised an eyebrow and smiled, "Planning to discover you're secretly royalty before we tie the knot?" "Marcus, I need you to sit down. This is going to sound crazy, but I need to tell you about some conversations I've been having with my mom." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. His smile faded as he saw how serious I was. He pulled out the chair across from me, and I told him everything. The strange questions, the late-night phone calls, her reaction to hearing about Sacramento, and finally, her suggestion that we might be more connected than we realized. Marcus listened without interrupting, but I could see his expression shifting from confusion to concern to something that looked almost like hurt. "Elena, are you seriously suggesting that your mother thinks we might be related? As in biologically related? I know how it sounds. Trust me, I know. But she's never acted like this before. She's genuinely terrified about something, and it's connected to your family somehow." Marcus stood up and started pacing around our small kitchen. "This is insane. Elena, we've been together for 4 years. Don't you think we would have figured it out if we were cousins or something? Our families have met dozens of times." I know. But what if there's something our families don't know? What if there's some connection from way back that nobody talks about?" He stopped pacing and looked at me intently. "Elena, do you want to take these tests?" The question hung in the air between us. Did I want to take them? Part of me desperately wanted to prove my mother wrong, to put this nightmare to rest once and for all. But another part of me was terrified of what we might find. "I think we have to," I said finally. "I know it sounds crazy, but I won't be able to walk down that aisle with this hanging over our heads. What if we don't take them, and then years from now we find out something that could have been prevented?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up one of the kits. "Okay, let's do it. But Elena, when these results come back and show that we're completely unrelated, I want your mother to get some professional help. This level of anxiety and paranoia isn't normal." We took the tests that night, following the instructions carefully and sealing the samples in their respective containers. The company promised results in 5 to 7 business days, which meant we'd have them right around our wedding date. The next few days passed in a blur of final wedding preparations, but the tension was unbearable. I found myself watching Marcus differently, looking for any physical similarities I might have missed. Did we have the same nose? Were our eyes the same shade of brown? I started noticing things that had never occurred to me before, and it was driving me crazy. My mom called every day, asking if I'd taken the test yet. When I told her we had, she seemed both relieved and more anxious than ever. "How long until you get the results?" she asked. 5 to 7 days. "Mom, are you going to tell me what this is really about? What do you know that you're not saying?" She was quiet for so long I thought she might have hung up. Finally, she said, "Elena, there was a time in your father's life, before he met me, when he lived in Northern California. He was young, maybe 22 or 23, and he had some relationships that didn't work out." My heart started pounding. What kind of relationships?
He told me once, years after we were married, that he'd gotten a girl pregnant when he was living up there. He said the girl's family made her give the baby up for adoption, and he never knew what happened to the child. I felt like the world had tilted sideways. Are you telling me I have a half-sibling somewhere? I don't know, Alina. Your father died before I could get more details. But when Marcus mentioned Sacramento, and when I started thinking about his age, about his family moving to Oregon when he was young, Elena, the timing could match up. I couldn't breathe. The possibility that Marcus could be my half-brother was so horrific I couldn't even process it properly. Mom, why didn't you tell me this months ago? Why did you wait until now? Because I hoped I was wrong. I hoped it was just my imagination running wild. But the more I thought about it, the more the pieces seemed to fit together. I hung up the phone and immediately called Marcus at work. I need you to come home, now. Alina, what's wrong? You sound terrible. Just come home, please. When Marcus walked through the door an hour later, I was sitting on our couch, surrounded by tissues, having what could only be described as a complete breakdown. My mom thinks you might be my half-brother, I said without preamble. Marcus stared at me for a moment, then sat down heavily on the coffee table in front of me. What? I told him everything my mother had revealed about my father's time in Northern California, about the pregnancy, about the adoption. Marcus listened with growing horror, his face getting paler with each detail. Elena, I am adopted, he said quietly. What? I was adopted when I was 3 months old. My parents always told me. They never hid it from me. I was born in Sacramento, and my adoptive parents moved us to Oregon when I was 5. I started hyperventilating. The room felt like it was spinning, and I couldn't catch my breath. Marcus moved to the couch and held me while I sobbed.
"This doesn't mean anything yet," he said, but his voice was shaking. "Lots of babies were adopted in Sacramento. The timing could be a coincidence." But even as he said it, we both knew we were grasping at straws. The pieces fit too well to ignore. We spent that night researching everything we could find about Marcus's adoption. His parents had always been open about the fact that he was adopted, but they didn't have many details about his birth parents. They'd gone through a private adoption agency that had since closed down, and most of the records had been sealed. "We need to know your birth father's name," I said, scrolling through adoption websites on my laptop. "My parents might have that information, but Elena, I can't just call them and ask. They're going to want to know why. And what am I supposed to say? That I might be about to marry my half-sister?" The absurdity of the situation was overwhelming. 3 weeks ago, I'd been planning the perfect wedding. Now I was researching whether my fiancé and I shared a father. 2 days before the wedding, Marcus finally called his adoptive parents, David and Linda Thompson. He told them he was interested in learning more about his biological family for medical reasons, which wasn't entirely untrue given our situation. The conversation lasted over an hour, and when Marcus hung up, his face was ashen. "What did they say?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. My birth father's name was Robert Martinez. He was 23 when I was born, worked in construction, and lived in Sacramento at the time. I felt like I was going to be sick. Roberto Martinez? My father's name, Roberto Martinez? The same age, the same profession, the same city? "Marcus, we need to cancel the wedding." "Elena, we still don't know for sure. Maybe it's a different Robert Martinez. Maybe—" "Marcus, stop. You know as well as I do that this isn't a coincidence. We need those DNA results before we can even think about getting married." But the results weren't due for another 3 days, and our wedding was scheduled for tomorrow. We had 150 guests coming, a venue booked, flowers arranged, and a photographer hired. Canceling at the last minute would be a disaster, but going through with it could be an even bigger one. That night, lying in bed next to Marcus, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to go through with the wedding ceremony,
but I wasn't going to sign the marriage certificate until we had the DNA results. We could have the party, celebrate with our families, and then quietly handle the legal paperwork once we knew the truth. It seemed like the only rational solution to an impossible situation. What I didn't realize was that my mother had already made a very different decision about what she was going to do on my wedding day. The morning of my wedding, I woke up at 5 a.m. with my stomach in knots. Marcus was already gone. He'd spent the night at his best man's house, following tradition. I stared at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom, where I'd decided to spend my final night as a single woman, and tried to convince myself that everything would work out. My bridesmaid, Jessica Chen, knocked on the door at 6:30. "Elena, time to get ready. This is going to be the most beautiful day ever." If only she knew. I forced a smile and let her in, along with my other bridesmaids, Sarah and Amanda. They were buzzing with excitement, chattering about hair and makeup and how perfect the weather was. Meanwhile, I felt like I was preparing for my own funeral. My mom arrived at 8 a.m. with coffee and pastries from my favorite bakery. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Dark circles surrounded her eyes, and her hands shook as she set down the coffee tray. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, kissing my cheek. "How are you feeling?" "Like I might throw up," I answered honestly. My bridesmaids laughed, assuming it was normal wedding day nerves. "Everyone feels that way," Sarah said. "It's completely normal to be nervous." But my mom and I exchanged a look that said everything. This wasn't normal wedding day nerves. This was the terror of potentially discovering that I was about to marry my half-brother. The morning passed in a blur of hair curling, makeup application, and dress fittings. My wedding dress was gorgeous, a vintage-inspired lace gown that had taken months to alter perfectly. As the seamstress made final adjustments, I caught my mom's reflection in the mirror. She was crying. "Mom, are you okay?" I asked. "Just happy tears," she lied, wiping her eyes. "You look so beautiful, Alina." By noon, I was completely ready, and the photographer was taking pictures in my mom's garden. I smiled and posed, but inside, I felt completely hollow. Every photo felt like evidence of a mistake I might be making. At 1 p.m., Jessica's phone buzzed. "Alina, you got an email," she said, glancing at my phone. "It's from that DNA testing company." My blood turned to ice. The results were here, 3 hours before my wedding ceremony. "I can't look," I whispered. "I can't do this." My mom appeared beside me instantly. "Alina, what is it?" "The DNA results just came in," I said, my voice barely audible.
The garden went completely silent. My bridesmaids looked confused, but my mom's face went white as a sheet. "You have to open it," she said quietly. "You can't walk down that aisle without knowing." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I opened my email, found the message from geneticdiscovery.com, and clicked on the link to view my results. The page loaded slowly, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, the results appeared on my screen. I scanned through the technical jargon, looking for the section about DNA matches. And there it was, Marcus Thompson, 0% DNA shared, no genetic relationship detected. I stared at the screen for a full 30 seconds before the words actually registered. 0%? No relationship? We weren't related at all. "Oh my God," I breathed. "Oh my God, we're not related." I showed my mom the screen, and she collapsed into one of the garden chairs, sobbing with relief. "What's going on?" Jessica demanded. "Alina, why are you taking DNA tests on your wedding day?" I looked at my 3 bridesmaids, who were staring at me like I'd lost my mind, and realized I owed them an explanation. I gave them the abbreviated version, my mom's concerns, the coincidences with names and dates, our decision to get tested just to be sure. "You thought Marcus might be your brother?" Amanda gasped. "Elena, that's insane." "I know it sounds crazy," I said, "but you didn't hear my mom's theories. The evidence was pretty compelling." Sarah shook her head in disbelief. "So you're saying you almost canceled your wedding because of a coincidence?"
It wasn't just a coincidence, my mom interjected, having recovered somewhat from her emotional breakdown. The details were too specific to ignore. But even as she said it, I could see doubt creeping into her expression. Now that we knew the truth, her fears seemed suddenly irrational. Mom, I said gently, maybe you need to talk to someone about this. The anxiety you've been experiencing isn't normal. She nodded slowly. You're probably right. I think I let my imagination run away with me. When your father mentioned that old relationship, I filed it away in my memory. Then, when Marcus came into your life and I heard about Sacramento, about his adoption, I connected dots that weren't meant to be connected. But why didn't you just ask Marcus about his birth father's name months ago? Jessica asked. Couldn't this whole thing have been cleared up with one conversation? My mom looked embarrassed. I was terrified of being right, and I was terrified of being wrong and looking like a fool. So I just spiraled instead. Looking back, it was clear that my mom had been dealing with some serious anxiety issues. The combination of wedding stress, grief over my father's long-ago death, and probably some unresolved trauma from learning about his previous relationship had created a perfect storm of paranoia. But in the moment, all I felt was overwhelming relief. I could marry Marcus without any doubts or fears. We could start our life together with a clear conscience. I need to call Marcus, I said, pulling up his number. Elena, you can't talk to the groom before the ceremony, Sarah protested. It's bad luck. I think we've had enough bad luck already, I laughed, hitting the call button. Marcus answered on the first ring. Elena, is everything okay? You're not supposed to call me today. The results came in, I said, without preamble. There was a pause. And? 0% DNA shared. We're not related at all. I heard him exhale deeply. Thank God. Elena, I've been sick with worry all morning. I almost called off the wedding 3 times. You wanted to call it off? Of course I did. Elena, the possibility that we might be siblings was killing me. I couldn't imagine going through with the ceremony not knowing for sure. We talked for another few minutes, both of us giddy with relief. The weight that had been crushing us for weeks was finally gone. We could get married, sign the certificate, and start our honeymoon without any lingering doubts. After I hung up, my mom pulled me aside. Elena, I owe you a huge apology. I nearly ruined your wedding with my paranoia. Mom, you were trying to protect me. I understand why you were worried. But I should have handled it differently. I should have been more direct about my concerns instead of letting them fester and grow into something so destructive. She was right, but I didn't want to spend my wedding day dwelling on what-ifs and should-haves. Mom, let's just focus on celebrating today, okay? We can talk about everything else later.
The rest of the afternoon passed quickly. We touched up my makeup, fixed my hair, and headed to the venue, a beautiful vineyard about 20 minutes outside Portland. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m., with the reception immediately following. As we arrived at the vineyard, I felt truly happy for the first time in weeks. The sun was shining, the flowers were perfect, and I was about to marry the man I loved without any shadows hanging over us. My mom rode with me in the bridal car, and she seemed more relaxed than she'd been in months. Elena, I'm so sorry for putting you through all of this stress. I hope you can forgive me. Of course I forgive you, Mom, but I do think you should consider talking to someone about the anxiety. This level of worry isn't healthy. She nodded. I already made an appointment with a therapist for next week. I realize I need help dealing with stress in a more constructive way. As we pulled up to the vineyard, I could see guests arriving and taking their seats in the garden ceremony area. Marcus's family was there, my extended family, our friends, our coworkers. Everyone who mattered to us had come to celebrate our union. Are you ready for this? My mom asked as we stepped out of the car. I looked at the beautiful scene in front of me, the flower-covered archway where Marcus would be waiting, the string quartet playing softly in the background, the happy faces of people we loved. For the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely excited about my wedding day. I'm more than ready, I said, squeezing her hand. Let's get married. Little did I know that despite the DNA results, my mom still had one more bombshell to drop,
and she was planning to do it right in the middle of my wedding ceremony. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 4 p.m., and by 3:45, I was in the bridal suite at the vineyard, making final preparations. My bridesmaids were fluttering around, adjusting my veil, and making sure my bouquet was perfect. Through the window, I could see the guests taking their seats in the garden, and my heart swelled with happiness. 5 minutes, Elena, Jessica announced, checking her phone. Are you ready for this? I nodded, feeling more confident than I had in weeks. The DNA results had cleared away all the anxiety and doubt. Now I could focus on what really mattered, marrying the man I loved. My mom knocked on the door and entered, looking elegant in her navy blue mother-of-the-bride dress. She'd done an amazing job pulling herself together after the morning's emotional breakdown. Elena, you look absolutely stunning, she said, tears forming in her eyes again. I'm so proud of you. Thank you, Mom, and thank you for caring enough to make sure we got those tests done, even though it turned out to be unnecessary. She smiled, but something flickered across her expression, a look I couldn't quite interpret. Sweetheart, there's actually something else I need to discuss with you before the ceremony begins. My stomach dropped. Mom, please tell me you don't have another theory about Marcus and his family? No, nothing like that, she said quickly. This is about something completely different, something I should have told you years ago. Jessica, Sarah, and Amanda were still in the room, fussing with flowers and last-minute details. My mom glanced at them meaningfully. Could you give us a moment alone? She asked. The bridesmaids exchanged glances, but filed out, promising to be right outside if I needed anything. Once we were alone, my mom sat down in the chair across from me, wringing her hands nervously. Elena, what I'm about to tell you might come as a shock, but I want you to hear it from me before you walk down that aisle. Mom, you're scaring me again. What could possibly be so important that it can't wait until after the honeymoon? She took a deep breath. It's about your father. Well, about the man you've always believed was your father. The words hit me like ice water. What do you mean, the man I've always believed was my father? Roberto Martinez raised you, loved you, and was your father in every way that mattered. But Elena, he wasn't your biological father. I stared at her, unable to process what she just said. That's impossible. I look just like Dad. Everyone always said I had his eyes, his smile. You do look like him, but that's because… She paused, struggling with her words. Elena, Roberto was your biological father's brother. The room started spinning. His brother? Mom, what are you talking about? Dad never mentioned having a brother. Roberto had an older brother named Miguel. Miguel was troubled. He had addiction problems, couldn't hold down a job, and was in and out of jail throughout his 20s. When I was 19, I had a relationship with Miguel. I got pregnant, but he disappeared when I told him about the baby. I felt like I was drowning. You're telling me my real father was some drug addict who abandoned us? Elena, Miguel wasn't a bad person. He was sick, struggling with demons he couldn't control. But when he found out I was pregnant, he panicked and left town. I was young, scared, and completely alone. My mind was reeling. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my identity, was crumbling around me. So, how did you end up with Roberto? Miguel had told Roberto about me, about the pregnancy, before he disappeared. Roberto came looking for me, not to judge or blame, but to help. He said he couldn't let his brother's child grow up without a father, even if Miguel wasn't man enough to step up. Tears were streaming down my face, ruining my carefully applied makeup. Roberto knew I wasn't his biological daughter? Of course he knew. But Elena, he chose to be your father. He married me when you were 6 months old, adopted you legally, and never once treated you as anything other than his own flesh and blood. Roberto Martinez was your real father in every way that mattered. I was sobbing now, 28 years of assumed identity collapsing in the space of minutes. Why are you telling me this now? Why today of all days? My mom reached for my hands. Because when I started researching Marcus's background, when I was so convinced there might be a connection to Roberto, I realized I was being a hypocrite. I was demanding honesty and transparency about family secrets while keeping the biggest secret of all from my own daughter. But the DNA test cleared Marcus. We're not related. Exactly. The test cleared Marcus because Roberto wasn't your biological father. If Miguel had been the one who got that girl pregnant in Sacramento all those years ago, the test results would have been different. I stared at her, the full implications finally sinking in. You mean Marcus could actually be related to my real father? No, sweetheart. I've spent the last week doing extensive research on Miguel's whereabouts during that time period. He was in prison in Arizona when Marcus was conceived. There's absolutely no way Marcus is connected to your biological family. Relief flooded through me, but it was quickly replaced by anger. Mom, how could you keep this from me for 28 years? And how could you tell me right before my wedding? I know the timing is terrible, but Elena, I couldn't watch you walk down that aisle without knowing the truth. You deserve to start your married life with complete honesty, even if it's painful. There was a soft knock on the door. Elena? Jessica's voice called. The music is starting. It's time. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My makeup was smeared, my eyes were red and puffy, and I looked like I'd been hit by a truck. More importantly, I felt like my entire sense of self had been shattered. I can't do this, I whispered. I can't walk down that aisle right now. Elena, Marcus is waiting for you. Your guests are all here. This doesn't change anything about your relationship with him. It changes everything about who I am. Mom, you just told me that the man I mourned as my father for 13 years wasn't actually my father. You told me my real father was some drug addict who abandoned me before I was born? How am I supposed to process that and then pretend to be a happy bride? My mom knelt down in front of my chair, taking my hands in hers. Elena, listen to me. Roberto loved you more than life itself. He chose you, chose to be your father, chose to raise you as his own. That love was real, and it's still real. The fact that you don't share his DNA doesn't diminish what you meant to him or what he meant to you. But I've been living a lie my entire life. You've been living in a family built on love and commitment rather than just biology. Elena, Roberto used to say that anyone can be a biological father, but it takes a real man to be a dad. He was so proud to be your dad. The door opened again, and this time Marcus's voice called through. Elena? Sweetheart, is everything okay? The guests are getting worried. I looked at my mom through my tears. Does Marcus need to know about this? That's entirely up to you. This is your story to tell or not tell, whenever you're ready. I stood up and walked to the mirror, surveying the damage to my appearance. My wedding was supposed to start in less than 5 minutes. I looked like I'd been through an emotional tornado, and I'd just learned that my entire family history was different than I'd believed. But looking at my reflection, I realized something important. I was still Elena Martinez. I was still the woman who loved Marcus Thompson with all her heart. I was still the daughter who had been cherished and protected by Roberto Martinez, regardless of genetics. The love that had shaped me was real, even if the biology was different. Jessica, I called out, I need emergency makeup repair and I need it now. My bridesmaids burst through the door, took one look at my face, and sprang into action. They didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. They just got to work fixing my makeup and touching up my hair. 10 minutes later, I looked like a bride again. My mom adjusted my veil one final time and kissed my cheek. Are you ready? She asked. I took a deep breath, picked up my bouquet, and squared my shoulders. I'm ready. As we walked toward the ceremony site, I made a decision. I would tell Marcus about Miguel and Roberto eventually, but not today. Today was about celebrating our love and our future together. The past could wait. What I didn't realize was that my mom had one more surprise waiting for me at the altar, something she'd planned that would make this wedding day unforgettable for reasons I never could have imagined. As we approached the garden ceremony area, I could hear the string quartet playing the processional music. Through the archway of white roses and baby's breath, I could see Marcus standing at the altar in his charcoal gray suit, looking handsome and nervous. His best man, Tyler Rodriguez, stood beside him, both of them scanning the back of the aisle for my arrival.
The sight of Marcus waiting for me helped steady my nerves. Whatever revelations had just rocked my world, he was still the man I wanted to spend my life with. Roberto might not have been my biological father, but the love he'd given me was real, and it had shaped me into the woman Marcus fell in love with. "Ready, sweetheart?" my mom asked, linking her arm through mine. I nodded, taking a deep breath of the warm afternoon air. The scent of roses and lavender filled the garden, and our guests turned to look as the music shifted to the bridal march. But as we began walking down the petal-strewn aisle, I noticed something odd. My mom kept glancing around at the guests with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't the proud, emotional look I'd expected from the mother of the bride. Instead, she looked almost searching. Halfway down the aisle, she suddenly slowed her pace. "Mom, what's wrong?" I whispered, still smiling for the guests, but growing concerned. "Elena, there's someone here I need you to see," she said quietly. "What do you mean? Everyone here is family and friends. There shouldn't be any surprises." But my mom had stopped walking entirely now, about 20 feet from the altar. Marcus looked confused, and I could hear murmurs from the guests. This was not part of the ceremony plan. "Elena," my mom said, her voice carrying just enough for the front rows to hear, "there's someone who deserves to see you get married, someone who should have been part of your life all along." My heart started racing. "Mom, what are you talking about?" She turned and looked toward the back corner of the ceremony seating, where a section had been reserved for Marcus's extended family. Following her gaze, I saw a man I didn't recognize sitting in the last row. He was probably in his early 50s, with graying hair and the same dark brown eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. "Elena," my mom said, loud enough now for most of the guests to hear, "I'd like you to meet Miguel Martinez, your biological father." The garden went completely silent. Even the string quartet stopped playing. I stared at the man in the back row, who was now standing and looking at me with tears in his eyes. "That's impossible," I breathed. "You said he disappeared. You said he was troubled, that he couldn't be found." "I lied," my mom said simply. "Miguel has been clean and sober for 15 years. He's been living in Seattle, working as a counselor for addiction recovery programs. He reached out to me 6 months ago, asking if he could meet you." I felt like the ground was dissolving beneath my feet. 6 months ago? You've been in contact with him for 6 months and never told me? The man, Miguel, began walking slowly toward the front of the ceremony area. As he got closer, I could see the resemblance was unmistakable. He had my nose, my chin, even the same slight dimple in his left cheek that I'd always thought came from Roberto. "Elena," Miguel said, his voice rough with emotion, "I know this isn't how you imagined meeting me. I told Patricia I didn't want to disrupt your special day, but she insisted you deserve to know the truth." Marcus had left the altar and was walking toward us, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. "Elena, what's happening? Who is this man?" I opened my mouth to explain, but no words came out. The entire wedding party, 150 guests, and my groom were all staring at us, waiting for an explanation I didn't know how to give. "This is Miguel Martinez," my mom announced to the crowd, "Elena's biological father." A wave of gasps and murmurs swept through the guests. I could see Marcus's parents in the front row, looking completely bewildered. My own extended family members were exchanging shocked glances, clearly as surprised by this revelation as I was. "Patricia," I said, my voice shaking with anger, "how could you do this? How could you ambush me like this at my own wedding?" "Because you deserved to have your real father walk you down the aisle," she said. "Miguel has been waiting 28 years to be part of your life. He's turned his life around, Elena. He's not the same person who ran away all those years ago." Miguel stepped closer, and I could see he was trembling. "Elena, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything from you. But your mother thought,
She thought maybe you'd want to know that I never stopped thinking about you. Not a single day went by that I didn't wonder what kind of person you'd become. Then why didn't you come back sooner? I demanded. Why wait until now? Because I was a coward, he said simply. I was afraid you'd reject me, afraid I'd just cause more pain in your life. When I got sober, I thought about reaching out 1,000 times, but I kept convincing myself you were better off without me. Marcus reached my side and took my hand. Elena, we don't have to do this now. We can postpone the ceremony, take some time to process this. No, I said firmly. I've waited 4 years to marry you, and I'm not postponing again. Miguel, I turned to face my biological father. I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad you got your life together. But this is my wedding day, and I can't handle any more family drama right now. Miguel nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course, I'll go. Patricia, thank you for inviting me, but Elena's right. This wasn't the appropriate time. He started to turn away, but something in his expression stopped me. He looked heartbroken, but not angry or resentful. He looked like a man who'd accepted that he'd missed his chance and was prepared to walk away again if that's what I needed. Wait, I heard myself say.
Everyone in the garden was hanging on every word. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting to see what I'd do next. Miguel, I can't process all of this right now. I can't deal with 28 years of questions and emotions in the middle of my wedding ceremony. But if you want to stay, if you want to watch me get married, you can. Relief flooded his face. Are you sure? I don't want to make this about me. It's not about you, I said, and I meant it. This is about me choosing to acknowledge that biology isn't the only thing that makes a family. Roberto Martinez was my father in every way that mattered, but you're part of my story too. And I guess it's time I learned what that part looks like. I turned to my mom, but no more surprises, no more secrets, no more ambushing me with life-changing revelations. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. No more secrets, I promise. Marcus squeezed my hand. Elena, are you okay? Do you want to take a few minutes? I looked at him, this wonderful man who'd been so patient through weeks of DNA testing drama and family chaos, and I felt a surge of love so strong it almost knocked me over. I'm okay, I said. But Miguel, if you're going to stay, you should know something. The man who raised me, Roberto Martinez, he was your brother. So, in a way, this family reunion is about 15 years overdue. Miguel's eyes widened. Roberto? Was Patricia? You married my brother? I did. And he was a wonderful father to Elena. He would have wanted you here today, Miguel. Despite everything, Roberto always hoped you'd find your way back to your family. The string quartet, apparently deciding the family drama had reached its conclusion, began playing again. The officiant, Reverend Williams, cleared his throat and gestured toward the altar. Well, Marcus said, offering me his arm with a slightly shell-shocked smile, this is definitely going to be a wedding story for the ages. As we finally made our way to the altar, Miguel quietly took a seat in the back row again, and the ceremony began. But I knew this was just the beginning of a much longer conversation that would reshape everything I thought I knew about my family history. What I didn't know was that Miguel's presence at my wedding was about to reveal one final secret that would connect all the pieces of this complicated puzzle in a way none of us had anticipated. Reverend Williams, who had officiated dozens of weddings, but clearly never one quite like this, cleared his throat and opened his ceremony book. The guests had finally settled down, though I could still feel the buzz of excitement and confusion in the air. Dearly beloved, he began, his voice carrying across the garden, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Elena Martinez and Marcus Thompson in holy matrimony. As he spoke the traditional opening words, I tried to focus on Marcus's face, on the love in his eyes, on the normalcy of the ceremony. But I kept glancing toward the back row, where Miguel sat, still unable to fully process that my biological father was watching me get married. Elena and Marcus have chosen to write their own vows, Reverend Williams announced. Marcus, would you like to begin?
Marcus took my hands in his, and when he spoke, his voice was steady, despite everything that had just happened. Elena, when I met you 4 years ago, I thought I knew what love was. But you've shown me that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day. You've taught me that family isn't just about blood relations, it's about the people who choose to stand by you through anything. His words hit me harder than he could have known, given what I'd just learned about Roberto choosing to be my father and Miguel choosing to finally reach out after 28 years. You've shown me that even when life throws the most unexpected curveballs, Marcus glanced meaningfully toward Miguel, what matters is how we handle them together. Elena, I promise to love you, support you, and stand by you through every surprise, every challenge, and every joy that life brings our way. I squeezed his hands, grateful beyond words for his understanding and patience. When it was my turn to speak, I looked into his eyes and felt all the chaos of the day settle into clarity. Marcus, 3 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was and where I came from. Today, I've learned that identity is more complicated than DNA tests and family trees. But through all of it, the one constant has been you. I paused, stealing a glance at my mom, who was crying, and Miguel, who was watching with rapt attention. You've shown me that love means accepting someone completely, even when they come with complicated families and unexpected revelations. You've taught me that the future we build together matters more than the past we inherited separately. Marcus, I promise to love you with the same unconditional commitment that the best father figures show, not because of obligation, but because of choice. As I spoke those words, I saw Miguel's face crumple with emotion, and I realized I was talking about both Roberto and, in some way, about the second chance Miguel was asking for. Reverend Williams moved on to the ring exchange, and everything seemed to be proceeding normally when Tyler, Marcus's best man, stepped forward with the rings. But as he handed them to us, he whispered something to Marcus that made my fiancé's face go white. "Marcus, what's wrong?" I whispered. He looked from Tyler to Miguel in the back row, then back to me. "Elena, Tyler just told me something about Miguel that I think you need to hear." My heart sank. Not another revelation. Not now, when we were literally in the middle of exchanging rings. "What is it?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Tyler stepped closer and spoke quietly, though several guests in the front rows could still hear. "Elena, I recognized Miguel when he walked up here. He works at the recovery center where my younger brother goes for group therapy." I stared at Tyler, not understanding why this was significant enough to interrupt our ring ceremony. "The thing is," Tyler continued, "Miguel talks about his daughter all the time in the group sessions, about how he abandoned her when she was born, how it's his biggest regret. But Elena, he also talks about something else." "What?" I asked, though I was beginning to dread the answer. "He talks about how he's been sending money to help with her expenses for the past 5 years. Anonymous money, to help with college loans, medical bills, things like that." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What did you say?" Miguel had stood up from his seat and was walking toward us again, overhearing Tyler's revelation. "Elena, I can explain." "You've been sending me money?" I demanded, my voice carrying across the entire ceremony. "What money?" Miguel reached the altar area, his face flushed with embarrassment. "When I got sober and started working, I wanted to help somehow. I hired a private investigator to find out basic information about your life, not to invade your privacy, but to make sure you were okay." "A private investigator? Miguel, that's basically stalking."
No, Elena, it wasn't like that. I just wanted to know that you were healthy, that you were happy. When I found out you had student loans, medical bills from when you broke your leg 2 years ago, I started making anonymous payments. My mind was racing, trying to remember all the times over the past few years when bills had mysteriously been paid or reduced. The student loan payment that had been mysteriously credited to my account. The hospital bill that had been marked paid in full when I'd only made a partial payment. The time my car repair bill had been inexplicably reduced by half. "The car repair," I whispered. "My student loans, the hospital bill from when I had surgery." Miguel nodded. I couldn't be your father, but I could try to make your life a little easier. It was the least I could do after abandoning you. Marcus was staring at me. Elena, you never told me about bills being mysteriously paid. Because I didn't know where it was coming from. I thought it was clerical errors, computer glitches. I never imagined. I turned to Miguel, feeling a mixture of gratitude and violation. How much money are we talking about? About $40,000 over 5 years, he said quietly. The entire wedding party gasped. $40,000 was more than I made in a year at my marketing job. Miguel, my mom said, her voice shaking, you never told me you were doing this. I didn't tell anyone. I thought if Elena found out, she might feel obligated to have a relationship with me, and I didn't want that. I wanted her to choose whether to know me based on who I am now, not based on money I'd given her. I sank down onto the steps of the altar, my wedding dress pooling around me. This day had become so surreal that I couldn't even process it anymore. So let me get this straight, I said, looking up at the assembled crowd of family and friends. My mother kept it secret that my father wasn't my biological father. She invited my biological father to my wedding without telling me. My biological father has been secretly supporting me financially for 5 years, and we discovered all of this after spending weeks terrified that my fiancé might be my half-brother. Marcus sat down beside me on the altar steps. Elena, I know this is overwhelming, but can we maybe finish getting married first and sort out the family drama afterward? I looked at him, this patient, understanding man who'd stuck by me through DNA tests and family revelations and wedding day ambushes, and I started laughing. It wasn't happy laughter. It was the kind of hysterical laughter that comes when life becomes so absurd that laughing is the only alternative to screaming. You know what? I said, standing up and brushing off my dress. You're absolutely right. Miguel, thank you for the money, and we'll talk about all of this later. Mom, no more surprises today. Reverend Williams, can we please finish the ceremony before anyone else reveals any life-changing secrets? The Reverend, who looked like he was going to have quite a story to tell at the next clergy meeting, nodded eagerly. Of course. Where were we? Ah, yes, the rings. As we finally exchanged rings and said our I do's, I realized that despite all the chaos and revelations, I was exactly where I wanted to be. I was marrying my best friend, surrounded by people who loved me enough to make difficult choices and keep difficult secrets. But as Reverend Williams pronounced us husband and wife, and Marcus leaned in to kiss me, I heard one more voice call out from the crowd. Elena, wait, please. I turned to see a woman I didn't recognize, pushing through the guests toward the altar. She looked to be in her early 50s, with blonde hair and kind eyes that seemed familiar somehow. Miguel saw her and went completely pale. Linda, what are you doing here? The woman, Linda, reached the front of the ceremony area, breathless and emotional. Miguel, I'm sorry, but she has a right to know. Elena has a right to know about her sister. And that's when I realized that my wedding day wasn't over yet. I stood there in my wedding dress, holding my new husband's hand, staring at this strange woman who claimed I had a sister. The guests were completely silent, everyone frozen in anticipation of what would be revealed next. Miguel, don't, Miguel said, his voice pleading. Not here, not now. This isn't the time or place. But Linda ignored him, walking directly up to me. Elena, my name is Linda Chen. I was married to Miguel for 3 years, about 10 years ago. I glanced at Jessica, my maid of honor, whose last name was also Chen. The coincidence seemed too strange to ignore. I know this is terrible timing, Linda continued, but Miguel told me he was coming to your wedding, and I couldn't let another day pass without you knowing the truth. Marcus squeezed my hand. Elena, we can ask everyone to leave. This doesn't have to be public. No, I said firmly. I'm tired of family secrets. Whatever Linda has to say, she can say it in front of everyone. At this point, our guests have heard everything. Linda nodded gratefully. Elena, when Miguel and I were married, we had a daughter together. Her name is Jessica, and she's been your maid of honor throughout this entire wedding. The garden erupted in gasps and exclamations. I turned to stare at Jessica, who had gone completely white and was backing away from the altar. "That's impossible," Jessica whispered. "Elena, that's not true. My parents are David and Susan Chen. Miguel Martinez is not my father." But Linda was shaking her head. "Jessica, honey, I never told you the truth about your biological father because I was trying to protect you from the pain of knowing he'd abandoned us too." Miguel stepped forward, his face etched with anguish. "Linda, you told me Jessica wasn't mine. You said you'd gotten pregnant by someone else after we separated." "I lied," Linda said simply. "I was angry and hurt when you relapsed and disappeared again. When Jessica was born, I was so afraid you'd abandon her the way you'd abandoned Elena that I told you she wasn't yours. I thought it would be easier for everyone." Jessica was crying now, shaking her head in denial. "This can't be happening. Elena, we've been best friends for 6 years. We would have figured out we were sisters." I stared at Jessica, really looked at her for the first time with the possibility that we might be related. She had the same dark brown eyes as Miguel and me, the same stubborn chin, even the same way of tilting her head when she was thinking. "Jessica," I said slowly, "when's your birthday?" "March 15th, 1997, she whispered. I turned to Miguel. "How old would your daughter with Linda be?" He was crying now, staring at Jessica like he was seeing her for the first time. 27. She'd be 27 years old. The math was right. The timeline fit. And now that I was looking for similarities, they were everywhere. Jessica and I had always joked about how we both hated cilantro, how we both had the same weird double-jointed thumbs, how we both got the same distinctive freckle pattern when we spent time in the sun. "We need DNA tests," Marcus said practically. "Elena, you still have that kit from before, right?" "No," I said, surprising everyone, including myself. "We don't need DNA tests." I walked over to Jessica, who was still standing in shock near the altar. "Jess, remember when we first became friends in college? We used to joke that we were like sisters anyway." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Elena, I can't. This is too much. We can't be sisters. It's too crazy." I reached out and took her hands. "Look at me, Jess. Really look." She raised her eyes to mine, and I saw the recognition dawn on her face. We had the same eyes, the same nose, even the same way of crying where our bottom lip trembled. "Oh my God," she breathed. "We really are sisters." Miguel approached us cautiously, like he was afraid we might disappear if he moved too quickly. "Jessica, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Linda was pregnant when she threw me out. If I had known—" "You would have done what?" Jessica asked, her voice shaking with emotion. "Abandon me too?" The words were harsh, but Miguel didn't flinch. "You're right to be angry. I probably would have messed up your life the way I messed up Elena's. But Jessica, I want you to know that not a day has gone by that I haven't regretted the choices I made." Linda stepped closer to her daughter. "Jessica, I know this is confusing and painful. I made so many mistakes trying to protect you from being hurt." "Protect me?" Jessica laughed bitterly. "Mom, you lied to me about my father my entire life. How is that protection?" "Because I saw what his abandonment did to Elena's mother. I saw how Patricia struggled as a single parent before Roberto came along. I didn't want that for you. So I found David, who was willing to adopt you and be your father." I looked at Marcus, who had been remarkably patient through all these revelations. "Are you okay with the fact that you just married into the most dysfunctional family in Oregon?" He laughed, pulling me close. "Elena, I married you, not your family. Although I have to admit, our kids are going to have some incredibly interesting bedtime stories about their extended family." The mention of future children made me realize something important. "Miguel, if Jessica and I are both your daughters, then the money you've been sending—" "I've been sending money to Jessica too," he admitted. "Through Linda, I wanted to help both my daughters, even if they didn't know I was helping." Jessica stared at him. "The money for my art school tuition? The mysterious scholarship that covered my living expenses?" Miguel nodded. "I've been working 2 jobs for the past 5 years, trying to make up for 27 years of being absent from both your lives." Reverend Williams, who had been standing patiently through all these revelations, cleared his throat. "Perhaps this would be a good time to move to the reception. These are beautiful family reunions, but the sun is starting to set, and I believe you have dinner planned." Everyone laughed, breaking some of the tension. But Jessica grabbed my arm before I could move toward the reception area. "Alina, what happens now? We've been best friends for 6 years, and now we find out we're sisters? Does this change everything?" I thought about it for a moment. "Jessica, we've already been acting like sisters for years. We've supported each other through breakups, job changes, family drama. The only thing that changes is now we know why we've always felt so connected." She smiled through her tears. "So, we're really sisters?" "We're really sisters. And you know what that means?" "What?" "It means you're stuck with me for life now. No backing out of this friendship just because things get complicated." As our guests began moving toward the reception area, Miguel approached both Jessica and me hesitantly. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I don't expect anything from either of you. But if you're willing, I'd like the chance to try being a father now, even if it's 27 years too late." Jessica and I looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that apparently sisters can have even when they've just found out they're related. "Miguel," I said finally, "being a father isn't about biology or money or making up for past mistakes. It's about showing up consistently from this point forward." "I understand." "Good, because Jessica and I are both pretty high maintenance, and we're not going to make this easy for you." He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him all day. I wouldn't expect anything less from my daughters. 3 years later, as I write this story, Miguel has been true to his word. He shows up consistently, not just with financial support, but with emotional presence. He comes to Jessica's art shows and my work presentations. He's learned to be a grandfather to the baby Marcus and I had last year. Most importantly, he's learned that being a father means accepting responsibility for the impact of your choices, both past and present. My mom, Patricia, got the therapy she needed to deal with her anxiety and her tendency to keep family secrets. She and Miguel have developed a friendship based on their shared commitment to being better parents and grandparents than they were in their younger years. Jessica and I joke that we're the only sisters who had to DNA test their way into finding each other. But the truth is, we were already family long before we knew we shared a father. Biology just explained why we'd always felt so connected. As for Marcus, he says marrying into my family has never been boring. He's right about that. But he's also learned that sometimes the most meaningful relationships are the ones where people choose to love each other despite complicated histories and unexpected revelations. Roberto Martinez may not have been my biological father, but he was the one who taught me that family is about choice, commitment, and unconditional love. Miguel is learning to be a father by following Roberto's example, and I think Roberto would be proud of the family we're all choosing to build together. Sometimes the most important DNA test results aren't about genetics at all. They're about discovering that love, commitment, and forgiveness can create bonds that are stronger than biology ever could be. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.